Good. We'll go ahead and call the monthly Kern Valley Healthcare District Finance Committee meeting order of 103. Is there any changes to the agenda?
When I reviewed it, I didn't see any changes.
No. Okay. And there's a food distributed. We did not have a finance meeting last month, so were there any corrections to the meeting from the month of May?
No, not from what I've read.
So it was good to me. Everybody okay with sending them to consent?
Yes.
Item D is the public comment portion of the meeting. Is there anybody from the public? Let's see. Okay. Okay, we'll move on to the June monthly financial report, and we'll start with our unaudited financial statements. CFO Dave, welcome.
Thank you, John. We're going to dive into the numbers. We're at our fiscal year end through 12 months. And we're going to try to get to the file here. Here we go. So we're on page 8, which is the statistics. So
it's going to be page 15 in your packet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that page 15 in your packet?
No, we're on 8 in the packet. We're on my page 2.
Gotcha.
So we're on page 8. So I'll give you a second to get there. And it's labeled patient statistics. So line 7, discharges, admissions. We had a solid month in June, 32 compared to 30 and 16 last year. So a lot busier than it was last year in terms of the people admitted and discharged on the acute side. We finished the year actually a little bit ahead of the year before, 338 on discharges. Last year was 334. So that part of our business was held its own. We did see a decline on line 9, swing beds. For a while, we weren't using it at all till we figured out how to rebill it and do it the right way. We did it a little bit in June at 14, compared to a budget of 44, last year 50. And you can see for the year we were not as high because we had a couple months where we didn't do any at all swing beds, 418 compared to 634 a year ago. So swing beds was down. Overall patient days on line 14 was less than budget, but more than last year, went 123 compared to last year's 110. We were off from the year-to-date numbers, looking at the year-to-date total patient days of 1747. And you can see a year ago, we were at 2,098. So we were a little slower this year on the acute side. The continued lower numbers as we have had to deal with new rules in place for the skilled nursing patients to get patients approved for admission. We have to deal with the managed care Medi-Cal health plans now and not through the state. So it is taking us longer to get people admitted. So our census has stayed lower in June, 41.1. Finished the year averaging 44.2, which was down from 46.5 the year before. But that continues to be an opportunity for us going forward as a good potential growth area. I'm real excited about a new IGT program that's going to kind of make it a double benefit for us as we increase our census. It adds something like 8,000 a month for every or 8,000 a month for every new patient admitted to the long-term care is added to the IGT payment. So that'll even make it even a better return on investment as we get the census up on the skilled nursing unit. ER had a real strong month, and for the year, if you look at line 32, 697 ER visits, 592 budget, 628 last year, and we finished the year ahead 6.3% higher than last year at almost 7,600 ER visits. So that's the monthly statistics and the annual year-end numbers. Any questions or comments before I move on to the next page?
Dave, I have a question. So the difference in the billing for the swing beds, is that also because of HMO or?
No, that's, I believe, a Medicare change that we had to adapt to. Mark, do you know the specifics on that? You're on mute.
He shook his head no.
Okay, so I'll get back to you on the specifics. I was told at one point that there was a new way that we had to qualify to get patients into the swing bed program, and we'll give you some specifics next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Barbara, do you happen to know of the answer to that question?
No, I'm not aware of any changes in the swing bed from Medicare. Swing bed is a skilled nursing bed basically, but it's billed to Medicare first.
That's true. Yeah, maybe I was mishearing the reason why we weren't doing swing bed for several months. I was trying to remember what the reason was, and I'll get back and I'll clarify.
It comes from the physician. If he wants a swing bed, he has to justify and put them in a swing bed.
Yeah, there was something more than that, I remember. And because, like I said, it was a procedural issue that something had to change. And I don't recall what it was.
Yeah. So I can bring that to the next meeting.
No, right.
I know that the Robin, or your discharge planner, she has certain criteria, and she also has to do something with Irina paperwork wise, but I don't believe that holds up anything. It's just more paperwork from their side that they're required to do now.
Well, there was, because normally these are things that are required or requested of the health plans. BFMC was notorious for wanting to put patients into those kinds of beds instead of putting them as acute and so forth. That was an issue. So yeah, we need to go back and research that and bring that in.
Yep.
I know we are seeing them coming through now, which is fine, but
I'll find out what happened during the year, because we didn't have 2 or 3 months where the number was 0.
right.
Thank you.
The next page I want to talk about is 10. The adjusted financial strength, and next take a good look at it because it's probably not going to stay this high for very much longer. We had the benefit of a combination of a lot of things all come together for us throughout this fiscal year, with high bank balances and also some high profit margins. For example, what's going to happen in a couple months is some of the really good months that we had a little over a year ago are going to drop off, and then we'll have some months from the most recent year that weren't quite as good be part of the 12-month rolling average formula for total margin percentage, and so that'll cause the index to go down. So for example, going to the next page, we hit our peak last month at 5.67, went down to 5.03 in June. My guess is it'll be hover around maybe a little bit over 4, which still puts us in the excellent category, but it's probably not going to ever be this high for a long time forward, because we're going to be spending the money on our project, and that's a big part of the calculation, is having the liquidity part, which won't be quite as good at the end of next year. The year-end number for net income on the second graph here, 2,307,000, compares close to what we had in years fiscal 20 and 21. Not as good as the really high year we had last year, but would have been a lot higher if the delays in the IGTs wouldn't have occurred it's coming in a couple months, which is going to really make this current fiscal year a high opportunity for a much better bottom line with the much higher IGT numbers that we expect for this current year because of the delay that we didn't get the money in fiscal 23. The other thing I want to talk about as I go on to page 11 is looking at this cash flow. I want to look at the column labeled 22 actual, which is how we finished the end of last fiscal year. And the green number at the bottom here, we had 25,405 in the ending all-in cash balance. And that compares to where we finished at the end of June of 24,098,000. So we dropped about 1.4 million in cash. Our budget, I think, called for about a 400,000 drop. The difference being that IGT amounts that didn't come in, and also a lack of really strong numbers coming out of the business office, and the AR being higher also hurt our cash a little bit. So the combination of those two caused our current cash balance not to be quite as high as what we originally thought it would be, but there's good chance with the higher IGT amounts coming in next year, we will be doing some catch up on that area. All I wanted to talk about on the next page, page 12, is a analysis that I did for year end that wasn't as favorable as I had hoped, as we were trying to get a lot of these in the accounts receivable, some old accounts appealed and paid for. We haven't had as much success as I was hoping for on the appeals. So we're starting to see a higher write-off percentage of some of these accounts that relates to our, it's called the TARS skilled nursing billing issue that has gone on for like 2 or 3 years. So we're talking about accounts with dates of service of 2020 and 2021, 2022 that have just never gotten paid because of the onerous process that the state had in place for, it's called bed hold days. And we've had a lot of those sit out in AR and get really old. And we are now setting a different percentage. So this is a very top number. Last month we had it at 18%. We dropped it, and this is a net number, down to 12 as far as our collection percentage, which means we have a much higher allowance for bad debt and allowances of 23 million on line 5. That causes the net AR to be less with a higher negative balance here. And the net also will cause, on the following page, when you look at profit loss, there's a line that gets affected when we make that kind of adjustment. Again, these are just estimates of how much we expect to collect on our AR. And on line 7 in the category for deductions from revenue called discounts and allowances, this number ended up being several hundred thousand. I'd say like 500,000 higher, because we have a higher allowance for bad debt and deductible. So we're just being conservative, that because we're not winning the appeals that we were hoping to, that we had to show that on the bottom line as an estimate to be conservative, that we're not going to assume something that hasn't happened yet, and we'll just put it on the bottom line. Now, if we find out next year that we won some of the appeals that we didn't think we would, then we can reverse those entries, and next year will be favorably affected on this line by doing a prior year adjustment that was too pessimistic. So that hurt our bottom line for the month of June by having a higher deductions from revenue. You can see that percentage of 76 compared to 73 hurt our bottom line. We still eked out a slight gain of 30,502. We did have some pretty high variances on the expense side that I want to talk about. Purchase services We had in plant and maintenance, we've been spending a lot of money on paying for water testing, as the prices seem to be skyrocketing, and the amount of 20 or 30,000 over budget has been recorded on a lot of that water testing invoices that we've had to pay in purchase services in the plant and maintenance area.
That's a state mandate, so.
Yeah, it's not like we have much choice on it. All other expenses of 36,000, that was a payment for a recruitment for a new pharmacist. So that was the $30,000 payment, which caused that line item to be over budget. And I have some really good news on line 19. We found out this morning, as Barbara and I was saying, why was that number so high? We didn't have enough time before we closed out for this report. And we realized there's about 163,000, Barbara, that we will be reclassed before we go to audit. Would be less expense on this line item.
Yes, we double book something.
Okay, so that'll cause all this to be about 170,000 better for the month, and for the year end will be closer, instead of 2.3, be closer to 2.5 million. And we just found that out this morning. So that was some favorable news, and we'll get that taken care of. It's this committee's preference. If you'd like me to keep the numbers as they are, I can do that, or for the full board meeting, we can make those adjustments before we send it to audit.
If we can do that before the board meeting, that would be probably a good idea, just to present that as clean as we can, since we know it's there.
Yes.
Just so just if I could interject for a second, again, this is something that's always, been one of my pet peeves. It's the impact of mix to hospitals. Whether or not how much Medi-Cal you have versus Medicare versus other payers and so forth. Up on line 7, Dave talked about the deductions. Like I said, prior year, our deductions of revenue and that discounts and allowances was $6,282,000. That was 72% of our gross revenue.
Yeah, that's a lot higher this year. Right,
that's 76%. I mean, if we had just done this year what we did last year, the difference in that bottom line of being a $6,100 loss would have been a $728,000 gain.
Good point.
So, and it's just like even everything else being the same, all your expenses being the same and so forth. So that just goes to show you 1 or 2 percentage points on that deductions from revenue, because it's off a net or off a gross rather, is a huge impact to the bottom line. And some of the things are things we don't have any control about, whether we're admitting more Medi-Cal patients versus Medicare patients and so forth. So
we are seeing that trend of continued growth in government revenues compared to the non-government.
Yeah. So is this just for clarification? Is on line 7? Is this are these billed charges, or is this like uncompensated care?
It's that.
It's the difference between what we charge up here and what we expect to collect.
Okay.
And what we expect to actually collect down here.
So there's a couple of things that go into there. Some of those are contractual allowances that, again, where we've negotiated a contract, we'll accept this amount versus, so you've got some of that write-off from what charges were to what you agreed to accept. Some of it might be things you've not collected or whatever. There's a lot of things that factor into that. And so bad debt and so forth.
And you don't get any of that.
Bad debt wasn't actually line 8, but
in the hospital, get any of that back with the cost reports.
What do you think, Dave?
It's possible, if, like I said, on the appeals that we're running right now, that we might make some adjustments next year, which would, the estimates always are based on how much we expect to collect on the existing AR. But Tim's right, it is a function of what our payer mix is. If the way we bill it has a lot lower percentage payment of this top number, if it's high government, which means lower percentage of actual net to gross, then there's going to be a higher number here if there's more Medicare and Medi-Cal on line 7.
Well, conversely, I mean, it's not as bad as 20 years ago. I mean, it was 1999 when they had like 20 million in uncompensated care. which was a huge.
Yeah, that would have been terrible.
Yeah.
Hospital's
A
finances.
good example is, Dave sent me this video that came out. He said this morning that I'm going to send out to the board, and it really explains why hospitals fail and so forth. And it talked about, and it's not just the small rurals, although they referenced one of the small rurals in there. They talk about even some of the larger hospitals. Hahnemann Hospital, which was a humongous medical center in Philadelphia that went under earlier this year, and so forth. And it's primarily because it's mixed. It was downtown Philadelphia, major Medi-Cal, uncompensated care issues and so forth, versus a Mass General, and some of these places that are in high revenue producing communities and so forth. And so obviously people with good paying insurance companies and so forth. And again, it's just because of that failure to keep up with the payments and the costs, covering the costs of the care for the low income, that has caused this problem. And it's going to continue to affect hospitals until the government does something about that. And I think, as I talked the other day about this MCO tax thing coming through, and I think a lot of the hospitals are pleased that they finally went through, because some more of that money is supposed to shift to the hospitals for Medi-Cal reimbursement. So that will help us this year. And the governor just signed that the other day. Yep. So some things coming down the pipe, which we can benefit from. I think that'll help us financially, but they're so woefully behind, as we've talked about before, that, we've done a really good job of trying to stay ahead of that, but you can only do that for so long,
The way they describe hospitals that typically get into a lot of trouble, we have a lot of those characteristics of areas where they're economically not doing as well financially. The impoverished area that has a high percentage of Medicare and Medi-Cal is usually the recipe for hospitals that struggle.
Well,
so thankfully, we're not one of them.
Yeah, I'd like to take a look at that video.
I'll send that out too. I haven't finished watching it all, but it was really good.
Yeah, 17 minutes of very.
And they talked about this 46-bed hospital in Kansas, that was built to last 100 years, and this is only 20 years into its life, and they've had to shut the doors. And they're going like, the problem was they overbuilt it. It was built really, and the doctors, ER is running now, and there's a clinic there in town at the hospital. Everything else has been shut down, and they're saying, he says, we didn't need 40 beds. He said we probably should have been 15, 20 beds, or something like that, and just. So there's a lot of that, and we know some of that happened here. I mean, our ORs were overbuilt, and some of those things. I know one time we tried to overbuild on the SNP even. And like I said, thank God that didn't happen, because we never would have built 150 beds. But, so it's presenting some challenges, and I think some opportunities at the same time to go back and relook at maybe what do we do with these spaces, and, are there some other things that we can do to generate more revenue through them of a different type. Yeah. And so Mark and I talked about that at lunchtime. And so we're going to, Mark and Dave and I are going to try to get together hopefully tomorrow to begin looking at some of these things and some of the other big ticket changes that we've had and expenses and supplies and those kinds of things. So.
Yep. And it really starts from the top. And when you have your CEO talking that way, the departments listen, and that creates the right kind of mindset that we're all really trying to be cost conscious and make sure that we don't unnecessarily spend money that we don't need to, because it is such a small margin and chance for error in terms of hospitals that are struggling right now.
Yeah, and like I said, I think, when you get into that situation, everything needs to be fair game, and we need to look to see, are we being as efficient as we could be? Are there opportunities for to pick up things or improve our reimbursements on things? One of the things Carrie brought to me the other day was this service called SBI service, which basically takes a look at they work with the government through for the USAC, right? For mine just went blank. It's our high-speed internet and so forth. And when we first put that in, we were eligible for almost 75% discount off of what the costs were. And so part of that was a federal refund back, and then part of it was state. And then that dropped down to about 25%. And then we haven't had it for a while. So we are still eligible to participate in the service that he and I are looking at. Will help us recoup a good portion of that cost, as well as some costs that we didn't know that they would cover.
Yeah, I think that the cost that we didn't know they would cover is going to be more beneficial than just internet, right?
Yeah.
You know, once we have two ISPs coming in here, we're going to be paying maybe $7,000 a month, even if we get 65% reimbursement on that. You know, it's not huge numbers, but what could be huge numbers is all of the services that IT has. I mean, we brought them all in here. We have MDR, we have different firewalls, we have all these Office 365, different email archive services, lots of high ticket items that are just reoccurring monthly costs. A lot of those, there's grants available for, just grants that we don't know about, that are complicated to fill, or all these different things. So that's what this company would do, would be to help us do that, so that we can get some of those money.
So and that's the kind of thing we're going to really be focusing on going forward, because I think we've got, you know, again, just to be as efficient as we possibly can and make sure that we're getting every benefit that's out there for us. I know that's really what set us apart some years ago when we start getting into the IGT and that stuff, because some of the hospitals weren't even doing stuff like that. I know that was an issue up at Southern Inyo and some other facilities. And so we jumped on it the minute we were eligible for that stuff. It's like I said, just got ahead of the game, but you can't miss those opportunities. And so that's really what we're trying to work on.
So let me just go back to answer Catherine's question earlier, the swing bed question. I went to talk to Robin because Robin has got her finger on that.
Yes.
Basically, there's two things at play. It's the insurance companies not approving the swing bed admission,
right?
And it's a provider not wanting to have swing beds in, you know, not pushing for those. Right. So that's kind of where that's where the answer is.
Well, back 100 years ago, of course, you know,
I remember that.
Yeah, I sure do. You know, swing beds weren't used as much because we moved, you know, rehabs and we moved them next door, and that helped with the census over there.
Right.
We had therapies all the time, you know, knee replacement. There was so much going on, but then
I think the resistance on the part of the provider is the long-term stays that we see happening.
Yeah, and when you put them in a swing bed, I mean, they can stay 100 days. I mean, they can get the same, you know, and yet.
And the trouble with that is the incentives aren't necessarily aligned the same, because we actually get paid pretty decent on a swing bed,
right?
But the doctors get paid once a week,
right?
You know, so it's and then once a month on the SNF, you know, so it's just
well, and you know,
we just got to show them the hey, here's
it's a bigger toll on the staff because you have to meet all the activities, all the requirements for social services. Right. So I mean, it's a bigger you know,
doesn't that affect our average length of stay too?
It does.
It does.
No, well, not for
it does if they don't swing them.
Correct. Yes.
It affects.
Don't swing.
That's right.
Yeah.
It affects the
swing beds don't count towards your Medicare length of stay of 4.0.
Right. So yeah, there's a lot of.
And we need to keep that under 4.
Yep. And by the way, we ended up the year a little bit above 4, but the trend is really coming down nicely. The last half of the year we were under 4.
Right. Well, and again, half the year was still under COVID, so we were exempt from that. So
yeah,
it should be okay.
And it was easier to swing than to move them because we were just moving them into a
brand
new
day is one of the culprits that doesn't want to
do. So what we're looking at here on this page is the year-to-date profit loss statement. What we have here is this first column being for the full 12 months, what the activity was for the whole year actual, and the far right column being that same time period a year ago, 12 months ending June 30th of 22. And what I want to do on this page is do a comparison on the expense side, whereby we look at line 28 of 34,196,000, and we ask the question, What happened? How did it get so much higher than what we had a year ago at 31,480,000? And I've done a special drill down with using these same numbers that I'm going to switch over. Instead of using the variance and percent variance against budget, which is the second column, I'm going to make this column be the comparison, which is the prior year. So we'll be comparing current year to prior year instead of current year to budget on these percentage columns. So I'm going to switch that over so you can see that the same report looking at the variances in that manner. So hopefully you can see this, and you can see the same numbers of how we went from 34 million to 31 million, and then the percent variances over here. And I did a subtotal labor, non-labor, and it actually surprised me. I thought I was going to see a bigger percentage in non-labor. Non-labor compared to last year went from 12,833,000 to 13,694,000, which is 6.71. But there was 300,000 we paid for the ERC. So if I go on this spreadsheet and I subtract the 300,000,
that was 600,000, wasn't it?
No, it was 3 million. 3 million, and we had to pay him 10%.
Okay. Oh, for this, yeah, for the federal.
For we're talking about non-labor.
Yeah, you still got the state when you have to take it.
So taking that out, all of a sudden the percentage goes down to 4%, which not all that half bad in a year where we know we had hyperinflation. Right. So I guess we can't feel too bad about the escalation of expenses on the non-labor side. The thing that makes the labor confusing, it includes line 16, contract labor, which you could argue is a purchase service, but it is part of the workforce, the registry. You know, you could call that labor, but it's also a purchase service. So it is somewhat of a manageable number if we can find a way to start minimizing how much we use contract labor in this labor category that you can see escalated about 10% higher. And Tim's right, there's a lot more in the labor as it relates to the ERC. That's about 400,000. It was 282 the state plus the benefits. It was about a similar amount. And that would, so if we take, let's say 400,000 off of that, the percentage goes down to 7.8%. So it's still a high inflation number, but this is like the cost of doing business these days with hospitals, because we have to compete for labor, and sometimes we have to raise the wage levels of certain types of positions in order to get positions to people to come work for us. And we're finding that more and more where it's competitive, and for some positions we have to pay more than what we had paid in the past. So the increases are more than just their normal cost of living increases, which is 3 to 5%, but sometimes we have to go even higher than that for certain positions to recruit if we're short staffed. And a lot of the operational issues that we seem to have a common theme. And I'll give you 2 examples. The skilled nursing census is adversely affected because we can't always find staff for CNAs. And then what we're going to talk about later is how we haven't performed as well in the business office and on accounts receivable because of the staffing issues. And we have recently increased the wages for our billers. So those was just examples that I would label as the kind of the cost of business causing these inflation numbers to be higher than we normally would have liked. The problem with that is when we end up spending more than what the payments are increasing, we end up having, unfortunately, to eat up some of the money we need to spend on the project over the next 5 years, because we need to positively cover our operational costs each year so we don't have to cut into the money that we've put aside for the building project. So that makes this that much more important for us to keep our costs down going forward. One other area you can see is going to be highlighted when Tim and I Meet with Mark, purchase services. You can see that's up 300,000, 17.2%. We're going to look at things that we can do going forward to maybe get those numbers down a little bit. Excuse me. So any questions or comments on that?
It just kind of sounds like the contract labor seems like that's kind of like the nature of the beast right now.
Yeah.
But none of that's coming back. I mean, Mark and I talked to one, you know, again, he hasn't spent labor on acute now, registry on acute now. About ER, no.
We had one in ER that just left. I have no more registry.
We have one for acute care coming, don't we?
Yeah, well, she canceled, so
That's
I'm gonna have. She hasn't told me that yet, but I do have a need there. But for the most part, we're pretty covered on
We have
this side.
3 in the lab right now.
Yeah, the lab is that's CLSs are hard to come by right now. So and we're working on that.
How many are unskilled?
I have no idea. I wouldn't even know where to get.
Yeah, we need to check with
A
you.
handful.
So the last page I'm going to talk about is page 19, and I'm just briefly because we're going to cover it in agenda item number 4 when we talk about consulting, because we still haven't made the improvements that we were hoping for in the accounts receivable. Our days in receivable are still high at 84.47. The other disappointing number is when we look at patient cash collections on line 23, 22,749,000 compared to last year's 22,868,000. So we actually collected a little bit less, 0.5% less in our total collections in the business office this current year versus a year ago. So that's disappointing, and we are hoping that maybe looking at getting some training from some consulting might help, as we've not really gotten the progress that we were hoping for at this stage. So that's pretty much my report as it relates to the June numbers, and I will get out of that. Any questions or comments?
Any other questions for Dave?
I have a couple questions. When you talked about, there was some stuff with the billing, something to do with the TARs and the bed holds.
Yes.
And
It's
behind in that, or?
It's something that started, I believe, early 2020, where the state required a manual, all paper, that you had it wasn't electronic at all. You had to actually send the paper medical record information to help justify when we had these SNF patients on bed hold. And that would cause the state an opportunity to deny the claim if we didn't have the documentation that they expected. We didn't adjust very well to that back in 2020, and we continued to struggle. We had some turnover, including the manager. Chet wasn't as available, and then we had some billers leave. So we're talking about a 2-year process of never really getting a good handle on how to get the state what they needed in a timely way. And now we're on the back end, as when I got here was like 2 years later. We tried catching up and just haven't had the kind of success I was hoping for in terms of making the appeals. We don't believe we've done anything wrong in terms of how we bill it, but we have to prove to the state with the right documentation before we can get them to pay the bills. Maybe the consultant that we're talking about hiring, maybe they can shed some light on it and help us. But so far internally, we haven't figured out any plan to help break the code with the state and get them to pay on some of those bills, which was several $100,000 that we had to write off.
Well, okay, I remember in 2020, I was on the finance committee meeting, and when Chet was here, we had a meeting about this issue. I think it was probably before he got sick, but I remember us having a detailed meeting in the finance meeting about this. And
yeah, it's for some reason we never really got where we needed to be with it, and Deb took over the billing after that, and and she hasn't had any success either with what we know how to do. So we're looking for outside help to maybe somebody can help us figure out. We don't think we did anything wrong, but there's a lot of money that we're leaving on the table because the state's not agreeing with us.
Well, because I remember that was the issue, was Chet was saying here in a meeting that there was a lot of money that was not being collected or not being processed through the billing department.
So he was aware of it. Okay.
He was, but I think his that transition of him being here and COVID, his health, I think, and then.
But there are guidelines for that, correct?
Yeah, there are, but because they added some extra steps, they, maybe the rules on the original guidelines that were set weren't really modified. I don't know. I could have.
I think what I'd like to do is maybe just, have a meeting with the staff and just understand, because obviously even if they've been submitting, I'd like to know what we're submitting.
Yeah, because the bed holds 7 days.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so there's in 7-day increments.
Right.
Yeah.
And they have to meet certain criteria to go on that bed hold, and they pay for that bed hold by midnight of, day number 7. So if they're not back in that bed, and so if we're documenting, a minute or 2 late, we're forfeiting those funds.
Well, what they're telling me, there was reams of paper that they had to keep sending the state, which is the part of the patient medical record. It was a lot of information that for some reason it wasn't adequate as far as the state was concerned. The other thing that happened right around that time was COVID. All these employees started working from home, and that made it even more cumbersome.
The medical
records never work from home. We do work with billing.
No, I mean the estate employees had work.
On a daily basis, and we get whatever's needed from billing, from the TAR, and we even go so far as to work with social services to get detailed notes. And if I remember right, and I could be wrong, we had a time there that there were younger SNF residents being admitted, and we needed extra documentation for them.
Okay, that was it.
But we always will find whatever's needed and work with the department in documentation to get up to Stacy for that. So we can help with that.
All right. Well, we probably need to keep working on it, because I don't like what I'm seeing so far in terms of how much money's coming in. We're not getting the collections we expected on these old accounts.
And there's actually a spreadsheet, a shared spreadsheet that Stacy and my department have on TARs that they have done. We do have the documentation and then the follow through of that.
Okay,
so we need
and we can certainly look at that
again.
Let's save some of that conversation for when we talk about before the consulting thing, because I really do want to address some of that.
Okay, well, I did have one more question, and that is, how many appeals do we have right now? Do you know?
I don't have that number. I was tempted to have Deb join me on my presentation today, because I figured we'd get a little bit more in the weeds. I can certainly bring back that detail for you.
Okay. Thank you.
You can have as much time as you want.
John's going to put me on a committee with her.
No.
So
need a TAR.
They meet the skilled nursing criteria.
So they do need a TAR.
I should clarify.
They also pass RNA.
That was the thing that
they need that.
That was the new thing that
they put on for swings.
For swings,
That's another reason that it was more difficult to get swings in the last 2 years.
Those should be completed right on admission.
They are stiff. They weren't doing them over here. That was why.
So what Deb was able to accomplish was with patients with dates of service in 2022 and early and more recent, all those we were able to finally switch over to an electronic version of submitting the documentation, and those we're getting paid on. So the ones where I'm talking about writing off goes back to 2019, 2020, and 2021. Though that period of time when we weren't getting what the state required is where we're still having the challenges. There is no new challenge anymore, because now all these patients have a different set of criteria because they're all Medi-Cal managed care, and they have their own set of ways to approve those bed hold days in a different way than the DHCS did. So I just wanted to clarify that this is not an ongoing issue. This is an old problem that we never was able to fix. But so anyway, I just wanted to make that correction.
Okay, thank you.
So that's my report. And if you wanted to move on to the next agenda item, I know it's.
Sorry, I said I would disagree with that.
Which one?
About the managed care, because even when I did managed care and we got contracts for them, social services still had to complete that pass are all the same Medi-Cal criteria.
You could be right on that. I'll have to get Deb to verify.
I remember.
Yeah, probably not on this. Well,
Yeah.
They weren't required back
They
then.
weren't required on swing bed.
For
Yeah.
acute was a new requirement,
Yes,
wasn't it
yes.
January?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just
Like a recent one.
yeah. Hmm. Okay,
And we're getting the hang of it. We'll say that because
because we used to have them in all the
Robin and
admission
Irina
parts.
are really.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Barbara, anything on the local aging vendor report, page 23?
The local vendor report?
Yes, ma'am. It's all current, looks like to me, so.
Yes. Do you want to continue seeing this? I mean,
Yeah, that's fine. I'm okay with it if you're okay with it, Catherine.
Yeah, I'm
I mean,
okay.
just to see how the locals are doing. And then
and on the next,
yeah,
sorry.
The contract renewals, yeah, for page 20.
the contracts. Has everybody had a chance to look at them? Are there any questions on any of them? There are some that Mark wants to look at registry wise, I believe. You sent me an email on
Yeah, there's two there.
AMN.
The AMN contract, I'm probably gonna send them a 30-day out. And then there was another one that I talked with Tina about that we have to revisit. So I will be in touch with you in the next few days to talk to you about those.
And then the RX-30 is, we already canceled that.
Yeah. Is there an ongoing cost just to have access to the data?
There is a small fee. We have to negotiate that. We have a long period in which we can access that with no charge, but then we'll need one license.
Okay.
Is not some of the reconciliation still with RX-30 though, Carrie?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Is not some of the reconciliation of the electronic billing still coming through? RX-30 FDS is all related.
That might be, for some of the 340B stuff, Barbara, is that what you're talking about, or?
No, she's
I know
talking
there
about
was
there's a billing company involved, which is FDS.
Yeah.
Right.
They have to be separate contracts, right?
Yeah, but
I mean, RX-30 is the software. The FDS is the billing company. I don't even know if they're still related. At one point, they were the same company.
I'm not aware that they're not related. I mean, they may have different branches of stuff, but as far as I know, they were all related.
Let's take a look at that one.
Yeah, they have to be two different contracts because one is giving us our software, our previous software for retail pharmacy, which is no longer needed. We've switched vendors a few months back. FDS is the billing side of that. They're the ones like that are handling all the billing stuff for retail pharmacy. So doing two very different services. So there has to be two separate contracts for that.
But I think they were all under the same umbrella company, Carrie.
That could be, yeah.
That's how we got with FTS to begin with, because we didn't have it initially.
Right.
But I'm saying different agreements. So there should be two lines here between them because.
And they just may have different dates of when they're due. So we'll look at that.
At any rate, I believe we're still using FDS.
We are.
Okay.
Dr. Leho's building, were we going to buy that at one point? I couldn't remember.
We are assessing that still. Yeah, it's there's some questions, as we brought up before, about needing a type 3 building over there. And so we were working with the architect to try and find out whether whether or not it would pass or not. We know we have issues with the drain pipes. We have issues still with the refrigeration. Air conditioners are not filtered to the 90%. So we're also looking at an opportunity to go to CDPH and Oshpot to get a waiver, because there's very little rural space that would ever be found usable for hospital use and so forth. So their suggestion was that we might want to consider a waiver on the building, which save us hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we're working on that.
Okay. So with the exception of RX30, and did you want to pull that one or leave it on?
Well, the one for the software for the retail is not which is what this is, doesn't need to be here, so okay. We can take that one off.
And then
we'll take a look at the other one, the billing side of it though.
Okay, and then Mark wanted M healthcare. You want that one?
We're going to take AMN off.
Are they the parent of the other one?
No, Medifis has AMN, and the AMN contract that we have is expired. Yeah, it won't affect anybody that we have working with us now either.
So excluding those two contracts, are you okay with sending this to the board for consent, Catherine?
I am.
Okay. Moving on to the rest of new business, CER proposal here.
Say it with such delight. I'm joking. I go ahead. Okay, so I mentioned this yesterday, but it all is going to tie in together, which is we started internal vulnerability scanning, and those scans identified a high number of critical risks on our HP servers. These servers are operating a cluster it's a little complicated, cluster in VMware, so they all in a way work together, but this is between these 4 servers and the hardware and peripherals we have on them, this runs the hospital. Okay, those 4. There's a number of vulnerabilities, 30 to 40 vulnerabilities that were identified on these. The only way we can patch these is to have vendor support on them. We can't just grab the firmware off the internet. We need to get it from the vendor. To do that, we need this contract with HP to be able to obtain these licenses. This also includes so software support as well as hardware support on them as well. So that's why we need it. Any other questions?
Nope.
And this is vendor specific. There's no other.
Yeah, we're buying it from HP. The Insight might be reselling it, but we're buying it from HP.
I'm happy that taking the focus on the team.
Still, to go.
Do you have another Mark asking for money in here?
No, not this one.
Not this one.
It'd be next time. We'll send this to board for consent. Okay, the next one is Bob Easterday. You're probably the biggest one. This is for the ice machine for dietary.
Oh, what page are we on this?
Yeah, page 32.
Yeah, we have basically one ice machine down there. We've had numerous problems with this.
Had the same problem at the code.
It just beyond life, and so forth. They did in fact get it working again, and so but the point is we have no backup when this one went out. Maybe we were without ice. We were going down to the store and buying bags.
That's what we were doing.
So I couldn't get in.
So we looked all over the place, and there was like one ice machine available
in the country.
Yeah, it's ridiculous because there's been such a run on this stuff. So we managed to get our hands on that and lock it up. So we need that. So the plan would be to put the new one in place, and then we will keep the old one as a backup. And go ahead and clean it up when they get the new one in here and so forth. But yeah, we can't be without ice here. So so this one is a really necessary one. It's the only vendor we can find, so it is a sole source on that.
And how long will it take to get that?
I believe it's ready to ship.
Oh, okay.
My understanding. It was sitting on the shelf.
I hope they were sending that ticket soon.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. The fun one. The billing and coding discussion.
Yeah, this, like I said, I wanted to preclude this by, again, we've talked about our AR for some time. I mean, even when Chet was here, this was a huge priority. Obviously, the accounts receivable is monies that, for things that we have billed out, so that have not yet collected, and so forth. And I'm, again, I saw the letter in here from Deb. And I understand they've had monumental challenges, obviously, in trying to do that between new system installs, changes to ICD-9 coding systems, changes to the ICD-10, changes, we had staff leave, the manager left, they've just been hit by one thing after another up there. I think we're finally at a position now where we have a full staff department up there. And it's like I said, we have done this with a number of our other departments. We've done it with acute, we've done it with SNF, we do it with IT in terms of bringing an outside set of eyes in to kind of look at our operations and make sure that, we are doing everything we can. And those have been very productive for us and so forth. This is one area that we've never done and so forth. And so I really, talk with CPSI. I know Carrie has gone and brought back information from our national meetings, about their capabilities and so forth. And, like I said, I really want to take a look at it from the perspective of, what additional help can we provide to the staff up there? We have some great people up there, and we're not saying anything to the contrary. What we really want to do is make sure, again, that are we using all of the features of the system that we have? I think, Mark brought them in and talked about some things that nursing didn't know was there. There's things get updated and you just don't learn the new features and you just keep going on doing what you do day after day. And
there are reports that I can get that I didn't know existed, and when they came out, it was very enlightening for me to be able to kind of
just the management. And I'm sure that is a very similar situation for the billing office. I mean, that is a very complex process.
It's very complex.
Yeah.
Chad always used to say that hospital finance is crazy complex.
It is extremely. And so, like I said, for us not to take a look at this and bring in some consultants, the nice part about using the CPSI group is they know our system inside and out. They developed it, and so forth. And so, like I said, there's two components to what we're looking at, and I'm not looking for approval on this today. I'm just presenting the idea because we'll bring it to the full board to share with them. There was two pieces. One, to look at the coding piece of that. And obviously when the physicians, after they do their work and they do their documentation and so forth, medical records gets involved, as Brenda was saying, to do the coding aspects. And that's to basically identify everything that we did and so forth. And then that goes then into the bill and so forth. And the two costs for doing this, didn't run out of paper. I think the coding piece was about $2,000.
Page 2.
That's what I was going to say. This is the revenue cycle.
Yeah, I think coding is 2 and the other's 11.
Coding was 2,100.
There it is, 2,100. And so, and that basically looks at that part that medical records has been doing and so forth. And some of that is things, like I said, a lot of what they code is based upon what the doctors put in or don't put in or whatever. And so those important for us to learn what's not going in there that we might be able to work more closely with the medical staff on to help them out. The other side of that is the actual revenue cycle piece, and that's $11,000. And so, and that's broken up. Part of that $3,500 upon execution of the agreement, and $7,500 upon the deliverables of the report. And so, and that's gonna go through just about all the aspects of the revenue cycle up there. And so not big dollars in the grand scheme of some of the things that we've done, but I think absolutely necessary in terms of its ability. It'll more than pay for itself.
That's what I was gonna make my,
Yeah.
You'll probably have a pay for it.
In
But,
1 month. Yeah.
would they be able to
The
do,
firms I was looking at a year ago, the numbers I was getting was closer to 25 to 50,000. So
would they be able to do like on-site training with the staff up there on how to capture the claims and all that?
It would not be included in this.
No, this is just the assessment.
That would be another arrangement that we would have to make, to have some sort of deeper consulting going on to help, whether that would be done on-site or off-site.
Yeah.
We don't know yet.
So what does this include?
This would give us the information. This is show us your process. Let's analyze your process and how can we improve that process type situation.
So they're gonna look at what we have in our processes
Right.
too.
Yes.
Okay,
And like I say, because they're the experts on the system now, they are a billing company themselves. I mean, that is a company that was split off from CPSI to create this revenue stream for them and so forth. But a lot of that came out as consulting type services initially and so forth. And that's what we're looking at here is just consulting services, just to come in and take and look and are we doing it properly? What are we missing? What aren't we billing properly? You know, whatever. What are the opportunities for us going forward? Some of which we just may need to know about. And great, you point us in the right direction of where to find the answers for that. Some of it might be re-education, things like that we might be able to do under a separate agreement or whatever. So I just think.
How many hospitals in California do they do that for?
What's that, CPSI?
Yeah,
I think they have like 30-some hospitals.
30-some hospitals here in California?
and they're doing all their billing?
I didn't say they're doing all the billing. I'm talking
Well,
about
that's what I meant.
I'm talking about the consulting piece. So
I'm just asking if they are doing that.
To be honest, I haven't asked that question. So I just think, like I said, for someone who knows the system inside now like they do, I think it's worth taking a look at, you know. And so I'll bring this back to the board. You know, like I said, part of it was just to kind of get your feedback and so forth. We can go back and ask some more questions before we bring it back for approval. But
Is it appropriate to speak on this?
yeah, I was gonna, you can, and well, ask John. This is kind of a sidekick over here.
Yes, the floor is all yours.
Okay. So I think Sally and I in our department just found out about this from Dave via an email last week. And our stance on this from a coding perspective is yes, for compliance, we do need a coding assessment, just like we need a HIPAA risk assessment. We choose Buddy for our HIPAA risk assessment, which he's a part of CPSI. My only concern is sometimes when you get an assessment from the people that we are doing the coding from, they sometimes put those little caveats in there of, so we'll lower this if after this assessment, we can go ahead and we can maybe do some of this coding for you. And it's that type of an assessment or contract.
that's been taken out of here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Because if that's the case, then we felt a little side swing.
Well, yeah, every employee in there should feel that way.
And
Well,
I want to make sure that it is all on the table because I am representing my department.
Sure.
And there is full-time employees in there that has worked through COVID. And worked very hard. So we definitely are okay with an agreement but not a contract. And not taking over. And look at what we can do as long as we do it within our system with our people. We're all for training. We need that. Awesome.
And that's what this is.
And also, we haven't really been having meetings like revenue cycle meetings for AR. Since Judy Luttrell left, we don't have those meetings. And those helped with the AR, with the billing, with write-offs, with all of that. So there's some things lacking in the communication and the processes with these two departments being overseen that maybe we need to utilize also through this process.
Yeah, communication between the two is.
Between the two, and we work very well, and there has been some change in employees and stuff, but there's also, we're coming out of a pandemic. And the communication of what is behind, how many days behind, that hasn't been communicated. So.
Yeah, I would agree with Brenda that we've been remiss in not including medical records in our weekly revenue cycle meetings. It's been registration, Sherry, Deb, and Barbara, and myself. And in hindsight, I think you're right. I think we probably should have had you guys involved from the beginning, because you bring an additional piece of the puzzle that's a very important part.
We definitely need a coding review. It's good for compliance.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good. Just don't want to leave you out. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, now's the time. I'm all ears. This is,
I mean, it's going to go to the board eventually, but
Yes.
just not right now. We're just discussing it. So,
and
if you have any thoughts, I mean, yeah, we'd love to
yeah,
hear.
this
No,
is,
I mean,
it seems emotional.
What?
I mean, the seems, I mean, because it's like this department, but I mean, it's all for the hospital, but
Correct.
it's like we want to make sure our department.
I just want to make sure that one thing's, I guess, clear, and maybe it is this is a company that we have trusted, right? This CPSI, this is the parent company of this, is a company that we've entrusted to run a lot of our hospital, do a lot of services for us. And that's not done flippantly, right?
Right.
We've developed a relationship with these people. We understand how their processes work. We understand that it's overall a good company, right? It's not the idea of that they're somehow possibly out to do us harm or trick us into something. I just want
that's not what I was saying.
I just want that to be known that, like, could that happen? Sure. But we've done everything in our power to make sure that we're working with good people for a good company, and that's not this case. Now, I guess that's it. There's one other thing, I guess, is that interest comment that you're talking about, where they do come in and do that. Is that part of this? No. What this is just looking at our processes. There is a line in there that was removed because it can cause, it's a scary line, right? That if we go forward with this, then we would be refunded that amount. So that's what you're referring to, and that's what everybody saw, right? It was on this piece of paper. So we did have that removed to avoid freaking people out. But could that be part of it? That is what their agreement is, and that's kind of the way it is for everything. If they come in and do an assessment for us and we pay them, then that could be part of it. In this case, it is not.
I think, they have full scope services. I mean, they do consulting, they do billing, they do all kinds of stuff for hospitals all over the country and so forth. And I think, again, trying to find a solution that works for us, understanding the palette of services that they have to offer is, again, it's up to us to decide what we want, what we think we need, and part of, like I said, from my perspective is we've never addressed this.
Department should be involved.
They're going to be involved. Like I said, this part hasn't been discussed for a long time. I mean, this is relatively new. So, and like I said, I met with Sally and I met with Brenda. We had a very good conversation, and so forth. And I think they wanted to understand where I was coming from with this. And I says, again, my responsibility is to the overall organization and making sure that we are doing everything we possibly can to bring in the revenues that we need. Just like we have to provide the clinical services that we have to do. We have to sometimes bring in people with a different set of eyes to look at it from us, and just to see, okay, What's going on? What do we see? Okay, this is happening at dozens of other hospitals. They're doing this. And this has generated this kind of a result for them. I said, well, maybe you guys want to consider something like that. I said, it truly helps us in understanding and looking at things from that perspective. And that's what we're trying to do here. Are there other solutions that might exist under CPSI? Sure, there are. But that's not where we're nowhere near that. Again, our whole solution is and I've said this, I told you guys this. I've been on both sides of that equation of different systems I've been at, with centralized business offices, with decentralized ones that were hospital-based and so forth. My preference is always to have it decentralized, primarily because I like to be able to control my destiny and my staff and so forth, versus having somebody come in and do it for you. And I gave the example that Adventist Health tried to do that with Cerner. When they signed their agreements with them, they moved all of their business office, all of their HR people, and they says, all right, you guys, it's all going to be done centralized now in St. Louis with Cerner. So literally all these people that didn't want to move to St. Louis lost their jobs and so forth. Well, after 3 or 4 months of doing that, they determined that, oh, this was a bad idea. And so they decided to unwind that and now bring it back to the hospital. And guess what? Those folks all went and moved on and so forth. And so that killed them. And so, it's like I said, these are things, messing with your systems is huge, and like I said, I think, for the most part, our staff has done a great job. Like I said, have we had some challenges back there? Sure we have. No question. Turnovers, the managers leaving and those kinds of things. I am truly pleased that our staff and Debbie have stepped up, Barbara, everybody has stepped up to try and keep that thing going and so forth, and like I said, Barbara, Barbara's got so much going on there, and she's been missing staff herself on just the finance side, let alone the business office side. So, again, it's time to, let's take a look and see where we're at and just let's see what help we can give them. That's really wrong. So.
And, Barbara, do you have any input on this that you want to talk about now or no? I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're a big portion of this.
Not directly related to this?
To any of it, yeah. If you want to.
Before the meeting adjourns, though, I do want to say something.
We can talk privately, or you can bring your concerns or comments here. I feel like I want to know what your side of it is also. How do you feel about it?
Especially, because you're there every day, Barbara, as the controller. So your input here is pretty valuable to this committee. So
your experience alone is valuable to this committee. Yes. Your commitment to the facility is valuable to this committee. And so your input, whether it's positive or negative, is important to the board and to this committee. Sorry. So it's up to you. You know what? If you're okay with it, I would like to stop by on my way from this meeting. If you're not wanting to speak anything about, that's okay. She will. I know. I have Kleenex in my car and air conditioning. Sorry to put you on the spot, Barbara, but I value.
I really don't want to comment on this.
That's fine.
I do have something else to say, but I'm more than happy to talk to you afterwards.
Okay, perfect. I can bring John if he wants to go, right?
Yeah, if he wants to.
Okay. All right.
But I do need to
Barbara, you don't have to say anything right now.
No, I do have to say it.
Okay.
It's been my intention for some time to retire. So as much as I've enjoyed a lot of my time here, the stress and the pressure right now is just more than I'm willing to continue enduring. So my last day will be October the 6th in the office.
Well, congratulations, because you have put a lot of your time and energy and everything into this facility. I mean, I saw it when I worked here, I see it every day, and I know how it can affect people, and there's a time, you've put your time in, Barbara.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
For 6 years.
I mean, Barbara, you were here when Cal Mortgage was going to foreclose on the hospital, and you're still here. So, I mean,
Yeah, I remember that well.
Yeah.
So you've been doing things right your whole time here.
Yeah.
Yes.
I appreciate everything you've done, Barbara. I know you don't say a whole lot, and that's totally fine. I mean, but I see the reports since I've been on the board, even before I was on the board. And, you've done a remarkable job. And also being part of the team to get the hospital's finances stable for the last 20 some odd years. So yeah, I'll go with you, Kathy.
Okay.
And I'm going to publicly give Barbara a chance to change her mind anytime between now and August 6th.
Good luck.
Because we'd like to have her longer, and I say that to her on a weekly basis, but I understand she deserves to retire, and she's done a great job here.
Agreed.
Very much so.
All right, well, clearly we're not making a decision on
No, this
No.
wasn't presented for decision.
No.
but let's revisit it. Let's have the departments be kind of in sync, and everybody's input on it is valuable. So there's someone that haven't been left out.
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate, all it is, period, right now is let's see if we can improve. Nothing more than that,
Take
right?
it or look at it. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
So I don't want to overcomplicate it, but that's the simple one.
You overcomplicate.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the way, I think that's the easiest way to say it.
Yeah. Well, and as a board member, I am grateful for anybody that wants to look at things, and if there's a need to change. I have a lot of comments on how it used to be, and I know things do change, but there are fundamental things that don't change, you know? And so I appreciate everybody that's been working, you know, at the hospital, continues to work at the hospital, but patient care and finances they run neck and neck. You know, we're not going to get one without the other. Of course, patient care comes first to me, and finance is second. You can ask my husband, but everybody has to work together for us to even work. And that's why I said about emotional. I could just feel in the air that it was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is perfect, you know, and that makes it hard because when something's like that, it's because they either feel threatened, left out, or something, you know, and it's not by anybody meaning to do that, but in the choices we make. And they made the comment about, yes, they should have been included in, you know, meetings more or whatever. I have no idea about that because I'm not here every day, but yeah, I knew something when she came in anyway. I'm like, she doesn't
Never
need to
here.
come
I
here.
had to dress up for 2 days in a row.
Perfect, good job. That's what I was thinking. I'm on my third day, I'm done. So anyway, okay.
All right,
We move in mimosa, that's what.
we're adjourned at 2:21. Thanks all.
Thank
This
you.
was good.